All right, so we've got quite a bit to dig into today. Some pretty intense stuff, actually.
Yeah, it looks like things are getting a little heated out there.
Yeah, you sent over these sources, and I gotta say, it's pretty wild what's going on. Early April 2025, and the world is well, it's kind of blowing up,
I
actually.
think blowing up is a pretty fair assessment. We see these reports of massive protests, and it's not just isolated incidents, right? It seems like the entire world is reacting to, well, to Trump being back in the White House, and now Elon Musk's this whole DOGE thing is throwing fuel on the fire.
Right, and that's what's so fascinating to me is it's not just like, oh, people don't like Trump again, or people are uneasy about Elon Musk. It's like these two things are kind of feeding off each other in this really volatile way.
Totally. It's like a perfect storm.
Yeah.
You've got this backdrop of anxieties about the economy and climate change and social issues, and then bam, Trump gets reelected, and then he brings in Musk to run this super powerful new department.
Yeah, I mean, DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency, it just sounds so Orwellian, doesn't it? And with Musk at the helm, it's like nobody voted for this guy, but suddenly he's got his hands on the levers of power.
Yeah, and you can see why that's freaking people out. I mean, you see it in these protests, right? No kings, defend democracy. That's what people are chanting in the streets.
Okay, so let's try to break this down systematically because there's a lot going on here.
Right.
We've got this huge hands-off
Yeah.
movement happening on April 5th, 2025,
Yeah.
right? But that's clearly not the beginning of the story.
No, not at all. It's more like the climax of something that's been building for months, starting right after the election in November 2024. I mean, there were protests right away in Cleveland. New York people were not happy.
Right, and then it seems like every few weeks there's another wave of protests,
Yeah,
each one bigger than the last.
exactly. You have the People's March on Inauguration Day in January, mostly focused on climate and immigration. Then in February, things really start to ramp up.
Right. Tell me about these 5501 protests. The
Yeah.
name is just so catchy.
So these were coordinated protests happening in all 50 states on February 5th, and they were specifically targeting two things: Project 2025, this conservative policy blueprint for Trump's second term, and then Musk's DOGE.
Hmm.
And it's, well, let's call it aggressive cost-cutting measures, $2 trillion in cuts. That's got to sting.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
And it's interesting that these protests were happening not just in D.C., but all over the country, state capitals, places like Lansing, Michigan, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So it's not just a Washington, D.C. bubble thing. This is nationwide.
Exactly. And then just a couple weeks later, you have Not My President's Day on February 17th, which involved calls for an economic blackout, urging people not to spend money as a form of protest. And then also this Stand Up for Science 2025 element, which I guess shows that people are worried about, science and facts being ignored.
Yeah, like the EPA getting gutted or something.
Exactly. And then we get to March 30th and the Tesla takedown, which is just so perfectly targeted. I mean, it's brilliant, really. Protests at Tesla dealerships all over the country.
Yeah, it's like they're hitting Musk where it hurts, right in his brand and his image.
Totally. And the message is clear. Musk, you're unelected. You're not accountable to people. You shouldn't have this much power. And then there's that incident in Watertown, Massachusetts, where a car hits two protesters.
Yeah, that was scary. And it just shows how tense things were getting, right?
Yeah.
People were literally putting their bodies on the line.
Right. And then all of this leads up to the hands-off movement on April 5th, which really brings all these different threads together.
Yeah, it's massive. Over 1,400 rallies in all 50 states.
Yeah.
Some estimates saying millions of people participated. And it's not just a bunch of angry individuals, right? This is organized.
Oh, yeah. You've got over 150 groups involved: the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, labor unions, even some big-name politicians like Jamie Raskin, Cory Booker. So it's a really broad coalition.
Yeah, and the imagery is striking, too, right? Upside-down flags, mock guillotine signs saying things like, "Hands off my rights, stop destroying America."
It's powerful stuff, and it really captures the mood, the energy of these protests. There's this feeling that something has gone very wrong and that people aren't going to take it lying down.
Okay, so we've talked about the timeline of these protests. Now, let's dig into the why, right? What are the core issues that are driving people to the streets?
Well, immigration is definitely a big one. Trump's back with his hardline policies, mass deportations, raids at universities, even going after legal residents. It's creating this climate of fear and uncertainty.
And we see that reflected in the protests, right? The Day Without Immigrants in Southern California in February, that shut down highways. That was a powerful statement.
Absolutely. And then you've got the economy, which is always a sensitive issue. Trump slaps on these tariffs in early April, and immediately the markets freak out. People are worried about inflation. And then on top of that, you have DOGE coming in and slashing federal jobs, closing agencies. It's like a 1-2 punch to the gut for a lot of working class people.
And it's especially bad for those who work in government, right? I mean, They're seeing their friends and colleagues lose their jobs, and it's like, is my job next?
Exactly. And you can see why labor unions are so heavily involved in these protests. They're on the front lines of this economic pain.
Okay, so immigration economy, and then you have this whole cluster of social issues, particularly around LGBTQ plus rights and reproductive freedoms.
Yeah, Trump wastes no time signing executive orders targeting these areas, and it immediately triggers a huge backlash from advocacy groups and everyday people who see these rights being eroded.
And it's not just about abstract rights, right? It's about
Yeah.
access to health care,
Yeah.
about people's lives and well-being.
Exactly. And then there's this underlying unease about democracy itself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't just about disagreeing with specific policies, it's about feeling like the system itself is under threat.
Yeah, that's where the whole Musk thing comes in, right? This
Yeah.
unelected billionaire suddenly wielding so much power, it just rubs people the wrong way.
Totally. It's like a nightmare scenario for a lot of people. And it seeds into this broader anxiety about Trump's attacks on the courts, on the media, on any institution that might challenge him.
And the irony is that while all of this is going on, Trump's response is to go golfing.
It's pretty tone deaf, right? You've got millions of people on the streets, and the president is out on the golf course. It just reinforces this feeling that he's completely out of touch with the concerns of ordinary Americans.
So it's not just America that's freaking out, right? These protests are going global.
Yeah, it's a global phenomenon. London, Berlin, Paris, even Lisbon, they're all holding hands-off rallies or joining the Tesla takedown.
What's interesting is that in some of these international protests, you see signs written in English, like they're specifically trying to send a message to America.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, we're watching this and we're not happy about it. In London, they're chanting hands off Canada, which shows that they're worried about Trump's impact on their neighbors.
Right, and in Berlin, they're not holding back with the anti-Musk slogans, fuck you, Elon, shut up, Elon, no one voted for you. It's pretty intense.
And they're also connecting it to broader issues like the tariffs and Trump's stance on Ukraine. So it's not just about Musk himself, it's about what he represents.
Yeah, this unelected power, this disregard for democracy. And then in Paris, you have protests focusing on Ukraine and climate change. So again, it's like these international anxieties are kind of converging around the figure of Trump and by extension Musk.
Right. And it's not just Europe. Canada gets in on the action too with those tell Trump to toke off protests in February. Those were great.
Yeah, and even hockey fans are booing the American national anthem. That's how deep this resentment runs.
And then you have Mexico, where the protests have been going on practically nonstop since Inauguration Day. They're burning Trump piñatas, American flags. It's very symbolic.
Yeah, the border rallies really highlight the human cost of Trump's immigration policies.
Right.
These are families being torn apart, lives being disrupted.
Exactly. And then you have Panama, where they're protesting Trump's threats against the canal. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, you don't mess with the Panama Canal. And then even Australia and New Zealand are joining the Tesla takedown. So this is truly a global movement.
It's amazing, really, and it shows that the concerns about Trump and Musk are resonating far beyond American borders.
So what are the experts saying about all of this? Is this just a blip on the radar, or is this something bigger?
Well, they're comparing the hands-off movement to the 2017 women's marches, which were huge. Millions of people participated. So this is not just a fringe group. This is a significant portion of the population.
And politically, you see this clear divide, right? Kamala Harris comes out in support of the protesters, while Trump allies like J.D. Vance are basically saying, get over it, Trump won the election.
Yeah, it's very polarized. And then you look at the polls and it's kind of confusing. On the one hand, Trump's approval rating is down to 43%, but on the other hand, a majority of people still say they prefer him over Biden.
So what does that tell us?
I think it tells us that America is a very divided place right now, and that these protests are just a symptom of that deeper division.
So where do we go from here? What are the long-term implications of all of this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, these protests are clearly tapping into some very real anxieties about the economy, about social issues, about the future of democracy itself.
And the fact that they're happening on a global scale suggests that this is not just an American problem, this is a global problem.
Exactly. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. But one thing's for sure, 2025 is shaping up to be a very interesting year.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the forces at play in this tumultuous time. As always, we want to leave you with a question to ponder. Given the sheer scale and intensity of these protests and the global reach of some of these movements, what do you think the long-term consequences will be? How will this period of unrest shape the political and social landscape of the years to come? That's something for you to think about.